taught you that? Who's teaching you these words? I'm really sorry you felt that way. Please tell me more about it so I can understand it and I won't do it again.
Small, little actions.
Education is so key. The more you know, the more you understand that we are all human at the end of the day. It's everyone's responsibility to make things work. Share the spotlight. If you're in a position of power and you've got the power to do that, share the spotlight. Try and build other people up.
Hi Envisionaires, it's Nicole Nguyen here. Welcome to the Envisionaire podcast. This is the podcast where we envision living our best lives by exploring everyday topics related to health, wealth, and community. On today's episode, we have Megan Wellman, who is a marketer and community manager who is on a mission to help ethnic minorities entering the working world. She offers them practical advice for career development and mentorship on issues around diversity and inclusion. She has also recently been appointed People and Culture Executive at a luxury travel company. I first came across Megan's profile earlier this year on LinkedIn when she posted a beautiful photo of herself in braids and shared her fear of doing so on a social media platform geared towards professionalism. The reason she was nervous about doing so was because her previous experience working in companies where her hair had been a topic of uncomfortable discussions. I was so impressed and inspired by her bravery and her vulnerability in that post. I just knew I had to connect with her. Megan has also recently written a book called Flourish, How to Thrive in the Workplace as an Ethnic Minority. Today, we have Megan on the Envisionaire podcast, and she is going to be diving into the book, and we're going to be talking about ways where ethnic minorities can navigate the workplace. And we're also going to examine ways in which non-ethnic minorities can effectively act as allies to help ethnic minorities along their career journees. So, a very, very warm welcome to Megan. Thank you for being on the Envisionaire podcast.
So excited to be here. Thank you very much.
We are so happy to have you. So thank you. Right, so before we dive into the book and this very juicy topic, I always invite guests to share about their origin story. So would you like to share a little bit about your childhood and maybe any key moments that you feel shaped your life and where you've come to date?
Yeah, absolutely. So born and raised in Bournemouth, which I love. It's a lovely seaside town. I feel very lucky that I was able to grow up here. Moved to London a couple of weeks ago, obviously, so I do miss being in Bournemouth quite a lot. But in terms of, growing up, my parents split up when I was very young, and my mum and my brother and we moved around a little bit until she met her now husband, my stepdad. And in school, there was only a handful of people in my class who weren't white British, and this was from primary all the way to secondary until I left. I recently read that I think 91% of people are white, according to ONS, in the Bournemouth, Christchurch and Poole area. So it was something that I was quite aware of growing up, that I was different and I felt different. I think the first memory I had of being aware of my race and being uncomfortable with it was when I was doing a dance show. I used to do dance at the Poole Lighthouse, and I'm making my way down to the stage, getting ready for my dance that was next up on the stage, and I walked past this line of girls. I was probably like 9 years old when this happened, and they were all white, and they all had lovely straight blonde hair all tied up in these really nice ponytails. And I remember walking past and really noticing that I didn't fit into that bracket, and I just felt like other, and I was like, I can't do my hair like that, like it wouldn't look like that, and they look very, very different to I do. And that's the first notable moment for me that I was just aware that the people around me weren't me as well. I had a family member who used to treat me quite differently, and call me names, and I felt very uncomfortable around him. But as a child, I didn't know why I felt uncomfortable around him, and it's only become clear as I get older and I understand more that he was racist, and I made my peace with him. But growing up as a young child, it's very hard to deal with, and it's hard to, because you're so young, you don't know why people have different views, and the history that you learn in school, it's not 100% accurate, and they don't tell you the part that, you know, British people had in the slave trade and all these other things, all this structural sort of racism and discrimination. So you don't have a reason to explain to yourself why people treat you differently. And the only thing you can think of is obviously the one thing that sets you apart and makes you different, and then you just start masking it. I straightened my hair for years, that when I was 14 I had to cut all my hair off. It was so damaged, and this then led to people calling me a boy in school because it was so short, and just other things that I think, had I maybe had been more accepting of my race and I had the education and a little bit more support around me when it came to those sorts of things, then perhaps I wouldn't have done things like that. There was another girl that I used to be friends with who one day decided we weren't friends and started calling me the N-word, and my mum was great, and we reported it straight to the police, and they said they felt that her mum would tell her off, so they didn't follow up on it. And it's just little things like that where you feel like you're not taken seriously, but it affects you. And I hate to think of people that have had it so much worse than me as well. I know that I am also in a certain privileged position because I am lighter skinned too. And I did grow up in Bournemouth. It's a relatively nice area, and there are so many people who have it so much worse. And like, if I struggle with the things that I've had to deal with, I hate the thought that other people are struggling so much more. So if there's anything that I can do to help in the things that I know, which is like work, I know how that can help people, then that's what I want to do.
Yeah, absolutely. So, okay, let's go back a little bit. So, for the listeners, you are a mixed race. Like, is biracial? Is that how you define yourself?
Again, it's one of those things. It's so hard to try and say what I am. I think I'm both. I'm white British and I am black Afro-Caribbean. My mum is white British and my dad is black. He was born in Lewisham, and then he was raised in Basingstoke before he moved to Bournemouth and met my mum. Thank God he did. But my grandparents, they were born in the Caribbean. One was born in Aruba, the other in Antigua. But prior to that, we're like, our bloodline is Nigerian. That is like our DNA is Nigerian. Yes. But obviously we're Caribbean because that's where they were born and they grew up. So
right.
It's a nice mix.
It's a nice mix, absolutely. And how did you, like, I guess you mentioned this idea of like being fair-skinned or lighter-skinned. Did you feel accepted amongst your peers, aside from obviously you being aware of your difference when you were doing your that ballet event? Did you feel like your peers accepted you? You mentioned bullying at 14, but growing up.
I think I had my friends, and I've got friends now that I've had since I was like 12 years old, and they're my closest friends and I love them to pieces. And I'm very, very lucky to have that. I've had very good friends, but I have also had to deal with racism from people that were, you know, in my dance classes or at my school. Luckily I had friends too, so I suppose it never felt so bad. But yeah, I don't know, it still affects you at the end of the day. I mean, there's always, like I mentioned, that girl who, you know, took it upon herself to start sending me hate and calling me the N-word. You know, it's horrible that a child even knows that language in the first place and knows who to say it to.
Yeah, absolutely. Especially in this day and age. Like,
yeah,
it's like the 20, whatever it would have been, like 2010, maybe something around that time. Like, that is
Who
insane.
taught you that? Who's teaching you these words? Like, it's so, to
Yeah.
say them in such a targeted, horrible way. Like, there are other words that we teach our children to
Yeah.
not say. Why is that not one of them? Why is that seen as an acceptable thing to say to people? It's really quite sad.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, yeah. Hopefully she regrets it and, has moved away from that sort of behavior.
Yeah, I hope so. I'd like to think so.
Yeah. So how did your kind of career progression, because I know you said you really, really want to help young ethnic minorities who may have faced some of the obstacles that you faced. So how was your career progression when you started working?
So, I mean, my career's been really quite varied. I worked in marketing pretty much when I left college in 2014 until 2022, so last year. And I still do freelance marketing now. This has been across multiple industries that I've worked in. So, technology like cloud and co-location to working with youth organisations and wedding venues, digital agencies and more. But it was during 2020 when George Floyd was murdered that I started writing about racial injustice and specifically discrimination in the workplace, because I wanted to help people not be vilified because of their skin colour at work and feel like a valued employee, breaking down that barrier. And it's all just talking from my experience, and then as I've gotten older, doing more research behind it, which is what the book in part is as well, which is really exciting. But there's so many instances of work that I've had to deal with. You know, I'm 26 years old. I've been made redundant twice, which, you know, in your lifetime, the average is 3 times.
Wow.
Which, yeah, it is what it is at the end of the day. I'm not going to sit and say it's because of my race, because you never know. No one's obviously going to admit that to you. I just, in order to protect myself, I'm going to take it at face value and say I was made redundant because the company no longer needed my role.
Yeah.
But there are certainly instances at multiple workplaces I've had where I've had to face, you know, racial discrimination, and it's awful. But if there's anything I can do to help other people, then I would love to do that.
And how have you dealt with those sorts of instances of discrimination? Did you have a conversation with the person, or did you have to escalate it? How did you deal with that?
It depends on what's happened. There have been times where I know something's made me uncomfortable, but I don't really know why, so I never said anything. But there have been times when it's been very obvious to me that people are being really quite rude and offensive, and I would escalate that to, you know, a manager, and nothing's ever really come of it. It's always like, oh, we've had a word with them. Somewhere I worked, I got referred to as a monkey before, and I escalated it. It's so horrible. I think I'm so used to these sorts of things now, I forget how shocking it is when I tell people. But yeah, just like there's loads of like little things like that, and that incident in particular, I, you know, explained that to a manager, and he got spoken to, and that was it. There was no apology. It was like, he's been spoken to, he won't do it again, sort of thing.
Was he saying it in like a jocular way, or in a sort of, was he trying to be funny, or was it actually in a derogatory, like it was very clearly, you know?
Trying to be funny, somehow comparing me. I wish I could remember probably like what the context of the whole conversation was, but was somehow trying to compare me to a monkey in some way. And that is, you know, that's a very known offensive thing to say to, you know,
Yes.
people that have black in them. And it's, yeah, he was an older man, and I think a lot of the time I tried to excuse people who were over a certain age and said, well, you know, they've grown up in a very different time. But man, my friend's Nan, she is well into her 70s, and she often gets banned from Facebook because she's always defending people, and she's grown up in a very different time. But
Yeah.
I'm like, if she is out there defending people, getting like banned off social media because she's defending them with her whole heart, then there is no excuse for anyone to grow out of these old belief systems that are making them so offensive to other people for no reason other than the colour of their skin.
Yeah, absolutely. Wow. So how have you moved from marketing into the tech industry, into public speaking, and now being an author?
Well, I think, I mean, once, like I said, obviously with George Floyd, it's sort of, there was just so much going on, and COVID, it was a really difficult 2 years for a lot of people. And once I started writing, I went into recruitment. So people could get their foot in the door with companies without there being any bias. And I started a HR qualification. And I'm really pleased now to be working for an incredible travel company where I look after the people and culture alongside my team. The culture at this company is amazing, and I've never experienced anything like it. And like you said, I've done some public speaking, touching on subjects that affect people who are often marginalised because of their skin colour. I can't say I love public speaking, but I keep finding myself in these situations, I think because I love writing about it. And
Yes.
then people have come across it and they're like, oh, please, talk on this podcast or speak at our show.
Yeah.
The nerves are always there, but it's so important. It needs to be discussed. It needs to be spoken about. And I think one of the most important things I wanted to get across as well is there's nothing wrong with being born into the situation you're born into, whether that's a position of privilege or not. You can't help being born into that situation, and you shouldn't feel guilty or feel bad for it. It's how you act after that, how you are towards people and what your intentions are. My career journey has been a bit hectic, but that is also because of the way I've been treated in certain companies. I've not had that opportunity to stay at one company for a really, really long time and, try and work my way up, because something always happens and then I need to find my way and do something else. But I'm so excited to now be working somewhere where everything about me is appreciated and valued, and that's the case for all of the employees within the organisation, which is really cool, and it's just not something I've ever experienced before.
That's amazing. I also feel like, I know you said you defined your career path as a bit hectic, but I actually think that you have created opportunities from the challenges that you have faced, and I actually quite admire that. I think that you've seen something, and exactly right. Like, what do? You have two choices. Do you just kind of like wallow in it or be a victim, or, not to say, I mean, obviously certain situations are very difficult. And so,
Yeah.
but I think the fact that you moved away from it intentionally, and then you created these opportunities, whether that was writing a book, speaking out about it, writing articles, I think that's a really beautiful thing, a shift essentially to do, like take something very dark and put light onto it and bring awareness to it. So I think it's actually quite inspiring, your career journey so far.
Thank you. It's difficult talking about these things because you're always going to get people who are on the other side of your opinion, because that's what they are. Opinions are opinions. They're there to be discussed and talked about. And I came off Twitter because I was getting sent some really horrible pictures and messages, and which is really unfortunate, but it's fine, because I think I mainly talk about these sorts of things on LinkedIn, because that's primarily where people who work are, and that's where I can talk about these sort of things.
Yeah.
There's always going to be people out there who don't agree, or they're not open to the conversation, which is really difficult. And I think that's probably the thing that stops me talking as much as I could, because it's just a fear of I don't want to have to listen to someone say these horrible things. I've had to deal with it most of my life.
Yeah.
If I can just help one person, then I'm happy.
Amazing. Love that. I think I'd like to move into the book itself, because there's so many things I want to talk about, and lots of questions. Book is called Flourish: How to Thrive in the Workplace as an Ethnic Minority. So why don't you tell the listeners a little bit about the book, and ideally what your motivations were? I mean, I know you did already mention obviously events in recent years and your own experiences, but what was the motivation to actually write this book specifically?
It's so hard. I can't remember the moment when I sort of decided I'm writing this. I think I just wanted to initially create like a guide that I wish I had when I was trying to find myself in the corporate world, and I was struggling with these different work situations where people were treating me differently or saying inappropriate things. I wish I had this book. it's got all these different, difficult conversations that you could have, how you can handle certain things, a little bit of education and the background into why people may have these certain views. And if I could have been given this book when I was like 14 years old, or when I was like picking my GCSEs and trying to decide what career I was going to go down, or even then when I was 17 and I was about to go into my career and start my job, that would have been amazing. I feel like it could have given me the tools I needed to probably navigate the situations better and also understand what was happening, because a lot of the time I didn't really understand what was happening. I just knew that things made me feel uncomfortable, or it wasn't really right. And I think this book is just, it gives you all the tools that you need to really understand why people may be a certain way to you, but how you can actually handle that and how you can sort of spot red flags essentially at a company, and you can decide if this is a place that you want to work or not. Because there are definitely places I would not have worked in had I been better at being able to spot that out initially, for sure.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, that sounds like the dream, to have that sort of almost like a glass door. Yeah, a glass door. I often hear from people that things have improved so much, and there's no racism anymore, especially in the workplace. What would you say to that statement as a 26-year-old who just, entered her career in the last, 10 years, 10, 15 years? Do you think a book like this is still needed?
Things have certainly improved since I first started out, but I don't think we're ever going to be finished when it comes to making the world a better place. If anything, I think people are probably a bit more sly about having misguided and unjust views now, out of fears of being cancelled or caught out, or maybe that person doesn't agree, or this person's so woke. There's still so much work to be done when it comes to having diverse workforces and also making people feel valued and included. But we're certain that racism does exist. It's silly to say it doesn't. That's why we have all these different awareness days and awareness weeks and months, because it is still a thing and people experience it. And you often see things going viral on social media that is purely because of racism. You still see people getting killed, getting treated terribly, like this lady on the bus. There's schoolgirls that are getting attacked, and it happens at work too, whether people really recognise it or not. It happens in how people commenting on these situations. They saying, oh gosh, pulling the race card. You're being racist by making that statement, because this is a very real way of living. Like, I can't change my skin colour. I can't, go to bed at night and know that I'm not going to have to deal with a security guard following me around when I'm doing my food shop in Sainsbury's. Like, there's so many levels to it in how people present themselves. And I think people are less obvious with it now. It's like microaggressions. I think that's more common. That's certainly things I've had to dealt with, rather than that outright, I'm calling you an N-word or I'm calling you this other offensive slur.
Yeah.
I think people are more open to the conversation, which is good, but there's so much work to be done still.
Well, on microaggressions, because I think, can you explain what you think, how you define a microaggression? Because I think some people don't really fully understand what it means.
I get it. I think it's essentially someone making a comment at you that isn't a direct racial slur, but certainly has the undertones of it. For example, a workplace I was at, I'd gone in with braids, and I even get anxious talking about this now, and you'll understand as I get to the end of this story. I'd gone in with braids, and it was really exciting. It's the first time I'd had braids, and as I'd gone into the office, they had this like figurine doll of Michonne from The Walking Dead.
Okay.
I can't remember the actress's name. I never watched the show, but they had a little figurine, and I was asked to take a picture with her and post it on social media, because I did their marketing. And I did. I felt uncomfortable. I never said anything. I don't think whoever made the comment and asked me to do that would have known that I was uncomfortable. But I did it. I knew that I felt uncomfortable, but like I said, I didn't say anything about it because I didn't really know why. And it wasn't until I started writing about these sorts of things that I learned that was a microaggression, because this character that Michonne, the character from The Walking Dead, she's very, very dark skinned. We don't have any similar facial features, and her hairstyle was actually locks, whereas mine was in box braids at the time. So this is a microaggression because I've sort of been lumped into, and the Michonne has been lumped into this, all black people look exactly the same. And you see it a lot of the time on TV when people, and in like articles, when they put the wrong picture of someone on an article. And once I sort of realised what that was, I then spoke about it on a blog page I had. And some people from the company started like voting on a poll I did, like, yes, you look like her, using different accounts they had. And
Stop.
they didn't even read the caption I wrote, because I said in the caption, they were not aware that this made me uncomfortable. And it's only after that I've realised it. Like, I'm not blaming anyone for the situation. I was just explaining how it made me feel, and how I realised after that that was a microaggression. And I think the issue with microaggressions is sometimes they are like completely unconscious, like unconscious bias, conscious bias. Like, you don't realise that you're doing it, or you're saying something that is essentially racist,
Right.
but it is. And that's why we have to talk about these things and feel comfortable talking about them, and not get your back up and get offended when someone talks about their experience and how it made them feel. It's to say, I'm really sorry you felt that way. Please tell me more about it so I can understand it and I won't do it again.
Yeah, absolutely. Because I think sometimes, maybe even in that situation, perhaps giving the benefit of the doubt, perhaps this person thought it was fun, and it was like a fun thing, and it was probably not meant with malice. But you're saying that microaggressions can inadvertently cause people to be uncomfortable based on their, simply based on race, right? So it's like a comment or an action made on someone's race or skin color, skin tone.
Yeah, it could be about, your culture, or a stereotype as well. For the purposes of this, it could be like saying, looking at a black person and saying, oh, do you eat jerk chicken 5 days a week? Just little things like this that sort of play into a stereotype and are offensive, presuming that a black person can dance really, really well, or presuming an Asian person is super, super smart at maths. It's these sorts of stereotypes that are microaggressions as well, and they're harmful because they're perpetuating bias and perpetuating skewed views of people and their culture.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you for that. Thanks, Megan. Okay, so Megan, you wrote in the book a very nice quote that I'd really like to talk about. The quote is, "It's not enough to say, quote, I'm not a racist," end quote. You need to be anti-racist and actually call out these behaviors in others and unjust systems so that we can all live in a harmonious society. Does this apply to ethnic minorities or non-ethnic minorities, or both? And how can someone do this in the workplace where we are often a little bit trepidatious about rocking the boat?
This definitely applies to everybody. It's everyone's responsibility to make things work. It's not just down to people who are oppressed or people who are not oppressed. Everyone needs to make an effort to be anti-racist, because there's so many races and there's so much to unpack when it comes to being anti-racist. There's that famous quote by Desmond Tutu: if you are neutral in situations of injustice, that you've chosen the side of the oppressor. If you want to be anti-racist, you need to hold your friends and your family accountable. If you notice, them saying anything problematic, you need to educate yourself by listening to podcasts or reading books, and support the work of people of colour, and avoid asking those sorts of microaggression comments, saying someone, but where are you really from? I've had that one a lot and I can't stand it. When I tell people I'm from England, they're like, yeah, but where are you really from? So it's just avoiding these sorts of situations, and education is so key. The more you know, the more you understand that we are all human at the end of the day, and we're not always going to get things right every time because of that, because we are human, we are not perfect, but the intention is so important. If your intentions are good and you're willing to learn and you're willing to help other people, then people are fine with that. I don't mind if people mess up, if they're trying to help out or they're being inquisitive, but the intention's so important.
Yeah, absolutely. But then how would someone, let's say they hear a colleague say something. So let's say you have, two non-ethnic minorities speaking, and one of them says something like a jocular comment that could be a microaggression. Now there's no ethnic minority person around. What does the non-ethnic minority person do in that situation? Would you recommend that they kind of just question it, call it out, or have a dialogue, start a discussion? How would you approach that, or how would you advise them to?
It absolutely needs to be a conversation, not calling people out. People will get defensive and will get their backs up, and then they're less open to having those conversations and learning something. So it's just about querying, what do you mean by that? Because especially the more you sort of dig into what someone means, the more they're going to have to either be very honest with what they mean and very much out themselves as being a racist person, or they don't really have anything to back up their statement. And then this is when the other person involved can say, well, actually that doesn't really, translate very well, or this doesn't actually make sense, or this is actually the reality of that situation. It's just open conversations. I really don't believe in like calling people out or cancel culture. I don't think it's very helpful at all. I don't think you should just blame people. I think try and have a conversation. If they're not open to a conversation, then that's on them at the end of the day. But all we can do is try, right?
I love that. Absolutely. So we have listeners from all different backgrounds and nationalities. And so if we have some, and I know we do, I know we have some non-ethnic minorities who want to really be an ally and, affect positive change. What steps would you advise them to take to help ethnic minorities along their career journey?
To be an ally, specifically in the workplace, if there are discriminatory practices and like processes and guidelines that like the company have, you need to dispute that. And again, it's like querying it and questioning why are these in place, because this is actually only benefiting a certain type of person. Are there people of colour who are qualified to be on the senior management team, but they're not for some reason, and they don't seem to be getting promotions, and they're struggling, for some reason, even though they're really good at their jobs? Ask why not. Why isn't your senior management team diverse? Share the spotlight. If you're in a position of power and you've got the power to do that, share the spotlight, guide people. It's harder for people of colour to be promoted and to end up in these leadership positions. So be a friend. What would you do if your friend was in that company and they were going through that? You would say, hang on, this isn't right. For some reason, you're not being treated how a lot of other people are being treated. So if that was your friend, what would you do to mitigate that?
Yeah.
And that's how you need to be, really. An ally is to be a friend, and to especially in the workplace. It's so difficult at work. There are so many things that make it harder for people of colour in the workplace. And that's a whole other thing to unpack. But any way that you can see that things aren't right because of that, you need to just do what you can to help. And sharing the spotlight is really, really important. Try and build other people up.
I also think that even just going for a coffee with someone junior and just trying to understand their experience, their career journey to date, their experience, how they have found it, even in the institution, is also really, really helpful. I mean, from my perspective, like I quite appreciated that when someone would make time for me, like especially a senior person who
Absolutely.
I consider to be an ally. That sort of small investment of 15 to 20 minutes can really, for me, impact not only like their belonging, but also feeling like they actually want to stay in the team and want to be like a part of that organization. And I think that can also probably help with retention, just those small little actions, you know?
Relationships are so important. And if you feel like, you know, some companies are huge and they've got over 1,000 employees, you know, maybe more. But if you could sort of have 4 people in a company that you can count on and you can talk to, you can have that support network. Amazing. Like you said, going up for a coffee or even like a video chat or in-person chat, you know, however your organization works, building the relationships with people so they feel like they can trust you, and you need to foster that trust as well. You know, you need to give a bit of yourself and they'll give a bit of them to you, and then you're creating that connection. And if they feel there are any situations that are unjust that they want to talk about, they can then come to you and talk about it, and you can help them and be like a mentor or be a friend or be the person that is going to, you know, say, hang on, this isn't right. Let's go down the proper path to, you know, find out. And you can hold their hand in that situation. And sometimes that's all people need.
Yeah, absolutely. So your book was, in my opinion, full of amazing advice, great advice. What is one key piece of advice that you really want to impart on a young ethnic minority person who's listening to this podcast and they've just they're entering the workplace or they are already in and, you know, they're working their way up? What would it be and why?
Gosh, one piece of advice is really difficult.
I know there are so many good ones.
Yeah. I think the one thing I probably needed to hear the most when I was younger was that it was okay for me to be who I am and to embrace that. Like I said, I spent years straightening and damaging my hair and hiding certain elements of my personality and just parts of my culture and myself that I wish now I had just embraced and learned that self-love a little bit earlier. And I think that self-acceptance and self-love contributes to so many more things about how you're projecting yourself outwards and what that can do for you in the corporate world. Because if you're insecure about certain things about yourself at work, then if someone else says something about that, you may not defend yourself. But if you are sure in your heart and, you know, in your mind, your body, your soul, that you are who you are and there is nothing wrong with that, you are so much more likely to defend yourself in situations of injustice.
Absolutely. That's such great advice. Thank you, Megan.
Thank you.
We are moving on to the final segment of the podcast, which is the Envisionaire questionnaire. And this is when we ask guests to reflect on their past and the present and the future. So are you ready for the Envisionaire questionnaire? Okay. Right. So looking back towards your past, what is one of your favorite childhood memories that it just brings you light and happiness?
Oh, that is a good question. I think, to be honest, the first thing that came into my head is while I spoke about that first dance show I ever did, I did take part in quite a few, is dancing on that stage, especially as I got older and the dance school grew so much. And as I did get older, there was people from all walks of life and from everywhere, different backgrounds and different ethnicities, and going on stage and performing with a bunch of other kids, and we all just loved dance, and that was our common thing, but everyone was so different. I loved that. It's probably growing up. I danced for like 10 years.
Wow.
That's a highlight of my childhood, of my life. It was great.
Sorry, is that all ballet, or did you do other sorts of dance?
Did ballet, tap, contemporary, hip hop.
Wow.
I did everything. I love my life was dancing. I loved it.
That's amazing. Do you still do it now?
I don't anymore. 10 years took its toll. I've got very creaky knees and creaky hips now. Which makes me sound really old. I'm 26. I've got bad knees.
I'm not like that. That's because you're 26. You're so young. Yeah, that's okay. There's lots of things you can do now aside from, Yeah. Do you know what's funny is one of my favorite memories, also as a child, was I used to do folk dancing through the school, and one of them was African dancing, like one of the segments of the sort of curriculum. And so African dancing, I remember we did this competition, and I was like, maybe it was a microaggression. I don't know, because I was like one of the few like children of color, but they took a photo of me and they put it on the newspaper. Maybe it was because I like to think I was the best dancer, but anyway.
I think, yeah. I think sometimes there are situations that I'm like, I'm just going to tell myself that was a positive thing.
Yeah.
Because it's much nicer to remember it that way.
Exactly. Right. Okay. So reflecting in the present moment, if there was anyone you could seek advice from in the world, who would it be and why?
Viola Davis. She is an actress.
Yes.
I love her. She is an absolute powerhouse.
Yeah.
She talks on such important topics and she's so talented at what she does. I wish she had the recognition that she deserves. But if I could sit and have dinner with her and ask her like 100 questions, I would do it. I would do it right now, and that would be amazing.
And would it be her, like the questions about like her life or like career in Hollywood, obviously writing and creating, how to get away with murder? Like what would the questions be? Everything?
Great show. Yeah, everything. I think, specifically because of what I'm interested in, how she's dealt with her career in Hollywood, because it's notoriously known to sort of uplift white men and like not even like white women too, just white men. And I would love to know how she's navigated that, how she has done so well, but then also deals with her women counterparts who are white, that they still get paid more, they get more recognition, they get more awards. I'd have so many questions about how that whole system works as well.
Can I come to that dinner? I want to be invited, please.
100%. I hope I'm going to manifest that.
Yeah. Viola Davis. I'm going to tag her in this podcast.
Yeah.
Okay, so future looking. What is one goal that you'd like to achieve in the next 5 years? I mean, you're so accomplished already at 26, but in the next 5 years, what's something you really want to accomplish?
Thank you. That's it's so crazy to hear that. I think because I always feel so behind on life. I think a lot of people feel like that though as well, just because everyone's on really different journeys. I would love to. I think I'd really like to write a novel. I think growing up, all I wanted to be was an author. But for fiction stories, not for non-fiction. I only started reading non-fiction books in like the last couple of years. I would love to write a novel, and I just want to help people. I hope people read the book as well. I'd love to in the next few years hear from people who said that it's helped them at work. That would be great. Amazing. Again, I'm going to manifest all of that.
I can't wait. I'm excited to see the journey. I'm excited to follow it.
Thank you.
I really want to thank you for being on the podcast. You shared so much about your own story and a lot of personal experiences. I really appreciate that a lot. And I really hope that everyone can go and buy her book. It will be available, I think, on Amazon. Is that correct?
Yes, that's correct. I've got a preliminary date for the 2nd of November. So fingers crossed it will all be okay.
Amazing.
And then we'll have it on there. Yeah, very exciting.
So everyone has to go buy it. It's called Flourish. And I've also had the pleasure of reading it. And it's a great book for anyone who wants to learn about systemic barriers that a lot of ethnic minorities face in the workplace. It's also a really great playbook for any young person who is looking to apply for new jobs, build relationships with their peers or managers, and also think about their long-term planning for financial and career goals. This is the book for you. You can learn more about the book and Megan by visiting her website, which is www.meganwellman.com. It's double L. Yes. In Wellman, and connecting with her on LinkedIn by searching Megan Wellman. I will, of course, always put her information in the show notes and all the links. So thank you again, Megan, for being on the podcast.
Thank you for having me. It's been so nice. Thank you.
All right, lots of love. If you want to see more videos like this, make sure you hit subscribe and check out this video here.